I'd like to start out this morning with so much gratitude. First, to you for opening your hearts to my ministry and for all the ways we grew together in the last year and 10 months, but even more for your faithfulness to this congregation. It's not always easy, and to the community, also not always easy. The work we do together will never be perfect. As much as we want it to be, none of us have the capacity to live into our values every second of every day. I certainly don't. But in the past 2 years, we have grappled with those values together, with courage and often great tenderness. You have inspired me, so thank you. I have been a witness to your efforts here when we're together on Sunday mornings, but also in quiet conversations, and sometimes not so quiet, in Zoom gatherings, in board meetings, in committee meetings, in emails, work parties, and social gatherings, meetings outside these walls. There are too many of you for me to lift up each individually, but I wish I could, because each in your own way are doing the work of this congregation, of this faith. I see you showing up the best you can, whether that is as a member of the board or even the president of the board, or just someone who works and struggles to get here on Sunday morning, and everything in between those two. We have not always agreed on the best way to do things, but I see in you a very strong desire to live out our shared values, holding love at the center. It gives me such hope. And the conversations are what matter, the wrestling, the arriving at the perfect answer. It's not, I don't think it's really possible. It's in the struggling that we live out our faith. Some of you have asked what's next for me. I will also be holding love at my center for the next year, turning my attention to my adult children and their newborn little ones, who will need all the love they can get if they are to adapt and thrive in the difficult and challenging times ahead. I will keep you in my prayers and hope that you will keep me and my family in yours. I cannot say whether I will return to congregational ministry. At this time, I'm open to any way I can serve Unitarian Universalism. I tell some people, I'm going to take some time off and then I'm going to wait for that phone to ring. Like it rang when, I think it was Jen Ogren who sent me a message and said, hey, there's this thing at Petaluma. So maybe I'll get another email someday. As I depart, I'd like just to consider with you for a minute the nature of church and this living faith that we aspire to share. The blessing and curse of being alive, of living, is that with every turning of the seasons, things change. I like some of the changes that have come my way personally, new friends, new challenges, and of course new babies to nurture and love. I don't love some of the other changes, the effects the years have had on my body and mind, the people I've lost, the beloved places and times I can never revisit. I miss my parents, especially now that I'm a grandparent. I know deep in my bones that someday I too will leave my children and my grandchildren, but I'm not afraid of dying. I'm comforted by the understanding that the next generation will carry on, and if I'm lucky, they'll carry some of my values with them. Whatever and however they decide to live their lives, I hope they will also keep love at their center. Like us, our faith is alive. It's also changing. Change is a part of who we are as a denomination. We have no sacred, eternal dogma or creed or beliefs or magic words. But I propose to you today that we have always held love at the center. The earliest Christian universalists, our direct spiritual ancestors, have been preaching about the importance, the primacy of love since the founding of the First Universalist Church in 1785. They believed that love was the essence of God's nature, and therefore no one could possibly be damned to hell. They believed so fervently in universal salvation that they split from the Puritan Calvinists of their time and formed their own denomination. I can't imagine how painful it was to make that change, that split. It was a huge conflict. Congregation against congregation, member against member, family member against family member. But those who believed that love should be at the center stood together. On the other side of our spiritual family, the American Unitarians, they experienced a similar conflict that was resolved in 1825. Before we were Unitarians, we were Trinitarians, part of the Christian Congregationalists, like my own grandfather, who was a Christian Congregationalist. The early Unitarians argued against the idea of the Trinity, insisting instead that there was one God. They believed Jesus was a wise, inspired teacher, but not God himself. This wasn't a new idea, of course. If you've studied our faith, Unitarian thought goes back much farther to 16th century Poland and Transylvania, and possibly even much earlier than that. Again, another painful conflict. Congregation against congregation, member against member, family against family. But those who believed that love was at the center stood their ground together. We have come a very long way since our earliest days, when our spiritual ancestors identified solidly as Christian, 100%. Since merging in 1961, Unitarian Universalism has transformed in ways that our early ancestors could never have imagined. I think many of them would have been shocked and possibly dismayed, most certainly dismayed. Our theology has transformed, evolved from explicitly Christian to transcendentalist, then humanist, to feminist and nature-honoring, and to our current focus, which is on multiculturalism and countering oppressions. Each change widened our circle with the hope that we could welcome more into our midst. And yet each change came with conflict. Congregation against congregation, member against member, family member against family member. There has already been some fracturing in our denomination around the multicultural issue. There's a small group of folks, including a few ministers, who do not feel that multiculturalism should be a stated goal of our association. And considering our history, this actually shouldn't be a surprise, as some of the early Unitarians and Universalists resisted abolition, resisted integration, resisted the ordination of women, and the inclusion of LGBT members. We're not perfect. We grapple together. We find the love at the center. As I depart, I just want to lift up that living nature of our faith. We have no set creed, no required beliefs, no magic words. This means that change is always coming. Soon you will have a new minister, and she might want to make a few changes. She is decades younger than Reverend John and I, which I think is a great blessing. And it's possible, however unlikely, that it might be challenging for some of us, for some of you who are really accustomed to things being a certain way. So I want to encourage you to be open and curious. I have to tell myself this all the time. Don't be getting all outraged. I know it can feel really good. We've talked about this. It can feel really good to be outraged. But please, if you can, resist. Ask questions. Be curious. Look for love at the center of whatever change is being asked for. And not just love for y'all here, but love for the world and for those who aren't here, but could be. love for people who really desperately need it. Our General Assembly is concluding today, I believe. It's the first ever completely virtual gathering, I think. I don't really like virtual meetings. I prefer to be there in person, seeing the faces of many beloveds and hugging my far-flung friends. And there's nothing like hearing thousands of voices raised in song together. And watching those traditional ceremonies, new ministers walking across the stage, retiring ministers. But I understand that in-person gatherings are exclusive to those who can afford to go and who are embodied in a way that allows them to go. It excludes people who can't afford to travel or cannot travel for some other reason. Both modalities allow some to be there and exclude others. So alternating between virtual and in-person gatherings feels like a good idea. I don't really like it, but I have to agree that it is a loving, caring solution. I'm bringing up General Assembly and the ways our association and faith changes because this past week, delegates voted and I believe passed some amendments to changes on the language of Article 2, and that's the section called Shared Unitarian Universalist Values. If the suggested changes pass in a vote at GA next year, the list of principles that we have in our bylaws as an association will be replaced. That's the UUA, not yours, but the UUA association. The principles will be replaced with a section called Values and Covenant. And it's going to be represented by a graphic, which looks like a flower. The words in the petals surrounding the center are interdependence, equity, transformation, pluralism, generosity, justice. At the center is the word love, superimposed on the chalice. And of course, there are a lot more words that go with this graphic. It's not this simple. I spent a lot of time reading through all the language in it, and it's worth looking at. There's been a lot of support for changing the language and some opposition as well. I don't know if the proposal will pass or not. That's up to the delegates of next year's General Assembly, which will happen in Baltimore. But my hope and my prayer is that after navigating 200 years of living, shifting theology, that putting love at the center of our value statement won't create a conflict that sets congregation against congregation, member against member, family member against family member. I hope we can stand our ground together, because without the courage to consider change, to adapt, there would be no Unitarian Universalism as we know it here today. This would be a Christian church. This week, the Earth, in its rotation, turns toward the sun here in North America, and the longest days of the year have passed. Week by week, day by day, hour by hour now, the Earth will turn back, and the days will shorten. Reverend John and I will take our leave, and as the equinox approaches, you will welcome Reverend Aya. In this time of turning, may we all prepare our hearts for change, because each ending is also a beginning. I offer you, at last, this poem by John O'Donohue, which is called For a New Beginning. In out-of-the-way places of the heart, where your thoughts never think to wander, this beginning has been quietly forming, waiting until you were ready to emerge. For a long time, it has watched your desire, feeling the emptiness growing inside you, noticing how you willed yourself on, still unable to leave what you had outgrown. It watched you play with the seduction of safety and the gray promises that sameness whisper. Heard the waves of turmoil rise and relent, wondered, would you always live like this? Then, the delight when your courage kindled and you stepped out onto new ground, your eyes young again, with energy and dream. A path of plenitude opening before you. Though your destination is not yet clear, you can trust the promise of this opening. Unfurl yourself into the grace of beginning that is at one with your life's desire. Awaken your spirit to adventure. Hold nothing back. Learn to find ease in risk. Soon you will find home in a new rhythm, for your soul senses the world that awaits you. Be well, my beloveds, and thank you. I will miss you. And I look forward to our meeting again.